TV hagaha hiigsiga humaaga hirka iyo horumarka guud ahaan geyga geeska Afrika. Dhab TV falanqeeyaha faaqidaha fikradaha fursadaha iyo faanka guud ahaan geyga geeska Afrika. Dhab TV waa tilmaamaha iyo taageeraha tubta toosan. Dhab TV Dhab TV Dhab TV.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Viewers, we are delighted to have today Mr. Ambassador Mohamoud Dirir GHEDDI, who's a career diplomat and bureaucrat, former Ethiopian envoy, special envoy to Sudan. He's also former minister of tourism. Currently, he's a retired diplomat, author, and businessman. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Dub TV.
I really thank you for having me, and I would especially thank Ahmed Yassin, with whom I've been in contact during his visits to Addis. We've talked about how we could work together on peace and positive contribution to the region, which is passing through turbulent times.
Indeed. Well, thank you much. And Ahmed Yassin and Engineer Mohamoud are also on, so thank you, gentlemen, for being on. I know we're here to discuss your book, Somali Proverbs, The Meanings and Wisdom. Before we get into that, if we can just do a general, since you touched on regional Horn of Africa issues. We know that you're a man of peace. You worked on conflict resolutions in the past, although you're a retired diplomat, but once a diplomat, always a diplomat. If you can just give us a general overview of what you know in terms of the process of the Renaissance Dam and the geopolitics related to it and how that impacts the region.
Well, the Renaissance Dam is an Ethiopian flagship project. It is a national project, may I say, and it has a consensus at the national level or at the political level as well. Ethiopians disagree on many issues, but the one issue that I would say unites all Ethiopians wherever they are, or in terms of the political differences, they share a common view and a common position vis-a-vis the GERD, or the Great Renaissance Dam. The reason is the country wants to use its natural resources, and hydropower is one of the cheapest energy sources which the country could tap into. There has been some regional, I would say rather, misunderstandings on the GERD itself. The Egyptians have been saying it is harming the Egyptian farmers, and it is a threat to the Egyptian people, which it is not, in fact, from my point of view and from the point of view of Ethiopia as well. And the Sudan has been shifting positions due to the political circumstances through which it was passing through. At times it was aligned with Ethiopia, and then it was shifting positions to align with Egypt. These are very bizarre issues for an outside looker, but when it comes to geopolitics, these shift of positions happen as related to the interest of each and every individual country. The issue has been pushed to the corridors of the United Nations Security Council by Egypt through its lobby, although Ethiopia has always been ready for a tripartite negotiation, which is based on a win-win approach that could serve the interests of all the countries of the region. However, Egypt wanted things to go in its own way, and it has been into the circles of the United Nations Security Council, but the United Nations has seen that it is not in its prerogative to discuss such an issue, which is not a threat to the peace in the region, and it is a development issue that has to be viewed or overviewed by the African Union. So it is now in the hands of the African Union. The fact that the Sudan is passing through turbulent times makes things a little bit difficult, because the three countries have to wait once they have a country that is passing through difficulties of its own. That does not mean Ethiopia is not passing through challenging times as well, but the issue of the Sudan is one of the matters that delays the negotiations to continue, as I
Right.
believe.
Right. No, that makes sense. Thank you very much for that overview, historic and current overview. So, in a sense, what you're saying is things are on hold until both the African Union as well as regional climate stabilizes. If I can shift into, you went into in terms of Ethiopia's current challenges, and give us a general overview of the political and security climate in Ethiopia. The entire world is well aware of the challenges the last year or so. If you can just give us a similar overview of the climate and how things are progressing.
Well, Ethiopia has a population of more than 100 million. Uh, it is a country that has been fighting against poverty and gobbling with the issues of democracy. It's a nation that has a long history of statehood, but uh, there is a deficit in democracy in Ethiopia, a deficit in good governance. And these are things that led the youth of Ethiopia to ask for a change that has brought into the political scene a new leadership, and the new leadership is trying to work on the transformation of Ethiopia. It's not an easy task because this is a country that has been a monarchy, then a communist, and now entering into the field of a nation building process that inclusiveness and democracy should have to be the bottom line. One could imagine the seriousness of the issue when it comes to the current conflict in Ethiopia. So I would say Ethiopia has the capacity of dealing with its own issues by itself without any foreign intervention. And that is the national consensus, I believe, in certain issues which are related to humanitarian aspects, the baggage that comes along with a conflict, especially a war. I believe that it's not as outsiders would see the issues in Ethiopia. There are issues that need to be observed from their historical perspective and the challenges that nation building and state building in Ethiopia has
Yes,
passed
yes,
through.
very well. So, in a sense, what you're saying is that the process is ongoing, and there is room for political reconciliation internally in Ethiopia, I take it.
I cannot precisely say that there is
Sure.
room for political negotiations between all the parties, but the government has established recently a commission which will take over the issue of national dialogue. So we have to wait and see what the nature of that commission would be, what would be the tasks that are within the prerogative of that Commission, I believe that it does not include a dialogue with the current crises in northern Ethiopia.
No, very well. Thank you much. We had you as an expert, so we wanted to use the opportunity. Everyone in the region and indeed around the world is concerned with respect to Ethiopia, those two, the security issue and the Renaissance Dam issue as well, vis-a-vis Sudan and Egypt. We'll move on to the second portion of the interview, and we'll let our friends come in as well. So thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for giving us an update on the regional climate. If we can now turn to your book, Somali Proverbs, the Meanings and Wisdom. First, can you give us a review of what drove you to compile these proverbs and put this book together?
In fact, I have seen that there is a stereotype when it comes to understanding Somalis. The issue of tribalism is what comes to the focus. And then the political disagreements between political forces in Somalia has given the impression that Somalis cannot agree on anything. But Somalis have a wisdom, and this wisdom, very unfortunately, is an oral wisdom because the nation did not have a script of its own until the 1970s, when the then government of Somalia has launched a campaign of establishing a council that overlooks the issue of writing the Somali language with a Latin script. There has been challenges, of course. Some people were of the view that this has to be in Arabic because for religious and spiritual reasons, they were preferring Arabic. And they thought that anything Latin would be something gal, if I use the right nomenclature, which all Somalis would understand. But foreigners also misunderstand Somalis because they misunderstand Somalis because their measurement is the political turbulence in Somalia. It's not the wisdom of the individual Somali. It's not the wisdom, the collective wisdom of Somalis as a nation that lives in a sparse region. I think Somali is the only language which is spoken throughout the region, if I may say, with few exceptions. So it is a trans-regional language. That is what I want to promote.
So let's jump into the first one. Yeah, before we run out of time. So there's I'll bring the first proverb. Let us talk means let us agree to make peace. So if you can, why that was important to put in the book?
Yeah, Somalis believe in peace and peacemaking. That is why you have the elder system. I come from a society where hair is the bottom line of the social consensus or the social fabric. And for peace. There is also Ijid Ankujido wa Gamadalis, which means that you pull me in this direction and I pull you on the other direction. That will only make our hands tired. So it is still a call for a serious negotiation that is fruitful.
So if I may, gentlemen, Yasin and Mohamoud, you guys can jump in. We have a lot of proverbs.
Absolutely.
So welcome, guys, jump in.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think one of the questions that I had was that after I read your book, one of the things that came out was that I felt like there was some sort of a cultural diffusion. I think which usually fuels by human interaction, communication, and wisdom. And I think it looks like you were trying to translate the wisdom in order to bring people together. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I have been trying to look into the parallels of Proverbs between Somali and Afan Oromo, a language which I speak fluently. and between Somali and even English proverbs, Amharic proverbs. Some Somalis would not think that there is a commonality between Amharic and Somali proverbs, but the book will help them understand that the human wisdom, generally speaking, is a collective wisdom of the entire human beings in this globe. What I'm emphasizing is that Somalis have a tradition, a folk tale that has existed for millennia, and that tapping into that wisdom will help the new generation of Somali young leaders to also, while they have to take the knowledge of the Western world, of the international global personality, local wisdom is also very important. So I believe in globalism, which is based and which has a strong, solid ground on being very local at the same time.
Okay. So if I may, then first of all, thank you. I've learned a lot from you while I was in this, and you helped me a lot to understand Ethiopian politics and how to maneuver. And I really appreciate that. To the audience that who are watching us today, we speak in English because the medium language I want to speak. Number one, the book is in English. Number two is that a lot of Somalis in the diaspora who was born and grow up here, we want to show them that the Somali culture is rich, and Somali culture is something to be proud of, and Somali language is something to be proud of. And somebody that who speaks how many languages? 5 or 6?
9.
9 language. So so somebody who speaks 9 languages. Can you tell us first of all how many? Tell us all the language that you speak.
Well, I speak my own language, which is Somali, of course.
Yeah.
Then about 4 or 5 other Ethiopian languages, including Amharic, Afan Oromo, Hareri, or Geisinan, they call it, and then Tigrinya. Well, these are the Ethiopian languages that I speak perfectly. And then comes the French, English, Arabic, and Hebrew.
And Hebrew.
Impressive.
Wow. We are blessed to have you with us, to be frank with you. And that's one of the reasons that we want to speak English, to show the Somalis. So having said that, when I read your book, you say that in terms of you're promoting, you're trying to define the Somali culture within the Proverbs. So, and somebody like Ernest Hemingway even took some Somali mahmaho. And can you talk about that, number one? And then I'll ask you about some of the contradictions of the Somali mahmah.
Yeah, in every other language in the world, there are contradictions in proverbs, because the circumstances in which the light is giving me some hard time. Anyway, proverbs have what we call reverse proverb. Every maxim or wisdom has its opposite. That is because it is in the nature of human beings not to have one point of view. Otherwise, that is communism. You are obliging people to aspire or to think or to have a uniform idea. That doesn't happen. And humanity is about diversity. It is about accepting our differences and living with them in a civilized manner, learning from each other. That's the way God has wanted us to be. Otherwise, life would be very boring if it is just one color. If I may say, living in the United States, you would understand, or North America, you would understand what that means. There are certain proverbs which could have more than one interpretation or translation, and very unfortunately, translation is building bridges between cultures, and that makes it a very difficult tool, because, or a difficult process, may I say, because you have to understand the language, the source language you are using, and the target language to which you are transferring or translating or transliterating the proverb. Somalis are a nation of poets. Some of our proverbs have a root in a folk tale or in a poem. So the young generation of Somalis have to focus on not only the proverbs, but it is an appetizer or a way that it paves the way for them to understand Somali poetry and to understand uh, the wealth of Somali wisdom.
Good. So then let's get a one contradiction. أرقي دعوة لموذا هرق لبا حدي هذه ما تشيدو. So, and you talked about in your book. Why did you get these examples in your book?
Yeah, a lot of Somali proverbs are based on animals, because we did not live in skyscrapers, in buildings, and in big cities. We lived in the Miyi. The Miyi is the rural settlement, and the rural settlement is a hard and a difficult place where only the tough could survive. So that is why the Somali spirit is indomitable. Whenever the Somali gets the right opportunity, he excels or she excels. We could see an athlete, a Somali athlete in Mo. We could see a very flamboyant politician and parliamentarian in Ayan. We could see a painter, a musician, what have you. So, given the opportunity, given the right opportunity, Somalis excel. And what we need to create for the new generation of Somalis is the right opportunities, where they could prove the indomitable spirit of Somalis. Coming back to the Proverbs, "Arqoye da'wa lamoda." When somebody has been very rich and a dignified person and passes through difficult times, he is not that previous lion. He may look like a jackal. So there is this comparison, if you like, or it's a contrast rather, when you put two things that do not come together. For example, the lion, according to the Somali folk tales, is very powerful, highly respected, revered, feared, if you like. And the jackal is considered as an underdog, if you like. Of course, you've been mentioning how Ernest Hemingway has used a Somali proverb in one of his books. Having been to Kenya and having interacted with Somalis in Kenya, I think that is how he got into that.
Okay, so I'm going to give back to the gentleman, but before that, let me ask you one more controversial thing that I've seen in the book, which is when we talk about the Somali women. So abal ragba leh, mid baaqdayna haween baa leh, mid soo degdegina xoolaha leh. That's why mid. Another one on arkay waxa weeye oo ahayd iga maqan tahay, but another one oo abaal ku saabsan baa jirtay oo meel ku qortay, but abaal soo degdegay rag baa leh, kan daahayna dumar baa leh bay ahayd taasna. So dumarka maamaha tan maxaa usoo qaadatay kuwa dumar ku saabsan, and always dumarkii raggana maamahooda equally ma ahe maxaa kuwa kaleeto dumarkan ku jiraan buugaaga.
There are many proverbs which consider and respect and also, how would you say, honor the role of women. For example, guri aan haweeni joogin waa meel maran. Where there is no woman in a house or in a household, that is a dark place or an empty place. And naturally, Somalis believe that there is a struggle between the man and the seasons. So, whichever side the woman goes to is the one that wins. If the woman sides with her husband as a lovely, cherishing wife, then he overcomes the drought. But if she henpecks him, then the drought wins over. So there is also this contrast. There are very difficult proverbs which are not accepted in a society that believes in equality. But in the nomadic society, was that equality prevailing? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. So it is like an insight into our weak points where we could learn from our social baggage that is very difficult to live with, to aspire for a society where equality and democracy prevails.
Very good. If I can come back to, our time is almost. anigu hal mahmah baan aad u jeclaaday aqal libaax lafa lagama waayo. Using that as our base for my next question, and I'll kind of try to combine a bit of the, if I go back to your diplomatic hat, and in terms of the regional stability with the last 30 years or so, if you can give us a quick overview of, since the early 90s, both Somali and Ethiopia, and indeed later in the 90s, Kenya, experienced political change, drastic changes, drastic turmoil. If you can give us a trajectory of where we were just prior to the early 90s, the issues that had transpired in the 90s, where we are today, and where the Horn of Africa as a region is going. And if you put your diplomatic hat on, with respect to the political nature, the seemingly ongoing conflicts, and if I can add Ethiopia's arm into, from Ethiopia perspective, stabilizing the region, from the Somali perspective, which I have, which may have not been a stabilizing force. So if you can, using the aqal libah, because in the last 30 years, libaaxa geeska Africa, Ethiopia ahayd. Marka, if you can give us an overview of tying the two together, the dominant force, the role that it played in the last 30 years, and where we are headed today.
Well, the fact that Ethiopia has intervened into Somalia under the pretext of fighting against terrorism, looking back, maybe at that time I was one of the supporters of that mission, but looking back and looking at it also seriously from a Somali perspective, as a Somali myself, has created a big hole in the relationship between the two nations. The current government is trying to mend that difficult past. Usually, nations pass through turbulent times. I am an optimist. I believe that the future is a bright one, because there is no way we could return back to feudalism. There is no way that Somalis in Ethiopia would return back to a totalitarian rule. Somalis are aspiring for an Ethiopia where democracy prevails, and the entire nations and nationalities in Ethiopia have that aspiration as well. And I think uh, the current challenges that Ethiopia faces are issues that Ethiopia could surmount, given the courage to listening to each other, given the courage to national dialogue, and I hope the upcoming national dialogue would be contributive towards that end, hopefully. But what has happened between Ethiopia and Somalia in the 60s and then in the mid uh,
17.
90s, if you could call it, is a black spot that we have to have the courage to call a spade a spade.
Very
That's
good.
beautiful.
Thank you
If I
very
may
much.
ask Guled one
Of course.
question. So when you look at the Somali literature in the Somali region, if we are talking about Ethiopia right now, the written literature, the historic, the educational system, everything. When you look at it, the rest of Ethiopia, you will agree that they are not equal. I will argue, from what I have seen and how under development they are. Uh, as a Somali intellectual, somebody that who's been working in that region for all his life, uh, how can we improve the Somali educational system in Somali region, Somali culture, and how can the Somali language right now is one of the prime minister already said one of the five working languages, and how can we put Somali language forefront in Ethiopia?
Well, I don't call myself an intellectual. I call myself a learning person. Uh,
We
and
call you
and in
that.
the process of learning, there is always a chance for gaining more knowledge and comparing notes with others. The Ethiopian dilemma, when it comes to the Somali case or Somali cause, we may call it, is that as an entity that has been marginalized and as an entity that has been suppressed by the regimes that existed, the deficit was in infrastructure and in education. So to build on the infrastructure, it is very easy because it's building roads, building bridges, building this and that. But the nation building, which is the most difficult, is how to establish a society that is knowledge based, that uh, taps into its own heritage, keeps its own identity, and then competes with the others on equal footing and respects the cultures of others and deserves the culture or deserves the respect of the others as well. So, what you are touching on is a very sensitive issue that needs a dialogue of its own within the Somalis as to say what are our priorities. Education, I believe, is what has brought Singapore to where it is. Education is what has given the North America the clout that it has in the world arena. So focusing on education is very important, and I think uh, going back to our cultural heritage is a and the spiritual values of Islam is something that we have to look at seriously.
Go ahead. That's great.
Yeah. Unless Engineer Mahmoud has any questions, I think we've certainly exhausted. One last question, Ambassador. If somebody wanted to purchase your book, where could they find it? Is it on one of the online marketplaces? Is it an ebook? How could somebody purchase your book?
Well, that would be a marketing issue which my daughter takes care of. But to borrow her words, she's telling me now the old days of the hardcover books is gone. It is time for electronic mediums. So I will discuss that with my good friend and brother Ahmed Yassin Qasim, so that we could work on Amazon and see what we could do together.
Yeah, very well, very well,
Thank
very
you.
well.
Thank you.
Definitely will promote. But I gotta give you the last question, which I'm right now. The Somali region is in drought.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry, we're done. Just I know the lighting is difficult. Somali region is in drought. People are in very crisis mode. How what can we do, and what do you think about that issue? And what can
You
cause it?
know, there are two types of droughts, Somalis say. Abaar xoolaad iyo abaar dad. What we are facing is the first one, abaar xoolaad, which happens to our grazing lands and the cattle we have and the camels we have. But the drought of the mind is not there. There are very agile, active, and dynamic minds within the Somalis as a leadership and as entrepreneurs, as a young generation. So there is a lot we could do, but the most important thing is to communicate, to listen to each other, and to focus on how to win over the drought itself, to beat the drought, if you like, and to also work on a sustainable project as to, because the cycle of drought has been in the past for 10 years. Every 10 years there used to have been a drought. Then that cycle has shortened. It became every 5 years, every 2 years. Now we are witnessing one drought after the other. So what should we do to overcome the recurrency of droughts? How do we deal with environment? What are our priorities? So these are issues that we need to work on, but this time we have to save lives first. Saving lives starts with providing water, providing food, providing the right medicines for children and women, the emaciated elders. These are our priorities. And I believe, as an optimist, we have a difficult time. That is the time when we come together as Somalis. And once we come together, there is no force that could stop us.
Excellent.
Perfect.
I think we go ahead, Ahmed. Do you have a
No,
question?
I'll finish it up. Good.
Oh, I think we're running out of time. Mr. Ambassador, I just wanted to thank you for your wisdom, knowledge, and time. And we welcome you anytime if the time permits. And good luck with the book and best wishes.
I really thank you all. I thank Guled Qasim and Mahmoud, my namesake. In the villages, we respect who have the same names. In the village where I come from, I was born in Dirida, a big city, but always the culture comes from the villages. And it is a way to create friendship and fraternity. Ahmed Yassin has been always very dynamic. I encourage him again and again. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to young generation of future leaders and to tackle our issues as Somalis, wherever we are, whichever state we are part of. The bottom line is that we are Somalis.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate it too. And we will definitely have you and we'll be working together in the future. And we've been working together in the past. And as always, thank you, Baspak Goulet. And again, thank you.
No, I think we've certainly tackled it. Perhaps when the book is ready for market, we can conduct this interview in Somali. And shacab badan baana daawada marka in af Soomaali haddaan ku samayno waraysiga dambe si looga faa'iideeyo. Dad badan baa su'aalo soo geliyey social media leeyihiin war af Soomaaliga maxaa ku dhacay? Waxna kuma dhicin. Buuggan baa af Ingiriis ku qoran. Waxaan la rabaa in la gaarsiiyo bulsho weynta Soomaaliyeed oo dibadda degan oo af Soomaaligii xoogaha ka fogaaday laakiin af Ingiriiskoodii haysta in la baro maxaa la yidhahdaa mahmahyada iyo khayraadka ku jira. Dabcanna waxaan rabnaa suuq ballaaran af Ingiriis inuu buuggan gato. Marka sababtaasaa keentay inaan af Ingiriis waraysigan ku samayno. Laakiin insha Allah waraysiga dambe ayaan af Soomaali ama haddii aragto af Carabi qof Carabi ku hadlaan keeni karnaa.
waxaan horeysiinaynaa af Soomaaliga horeysiinaynaa insha Allah. Dad badan oo aan af Soomaali kula sheekaysto waxay yidhahdaan oday reer miya sidiisii baad u hadashaa. Marka waxaan rabaa dhalinyarada cusub inay dhageystaan af Soomaaligaas qayb ka mid ay duugowday oo qaar ereyadooda ay lumeenba.
May insha Allah marka taydii baan ku noqon marka Ingiriiska waan ku noqon marka Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you all the best. And hopefully when you return, we will do this interview in English. And thank you all for watching. Have a good day.
Assalamu alaikum.
I really thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.